Welcome to The Next Stage, the podcast where we turn up the house lights on the future of venue management. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, this is your go-to source for the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the venue and event management industry.
The amount of information and the amount of change and the amount of opportunity has never been greater.
We've literally broken down walls and we're looking at how can we create a more seamless experience.
There's customer demand for sustainability now.
On the forefront when it comes to venues that might not look like what you think of as a venue today.
Welcome back to another episode of The Next Stage. I'm your host, VMA CEO Joel Edmondson, and I'm thrilled to have with me today Reggie Ba Pe. Should I put the third at the end?
Sure.
Yeah? I'll ask you more about that
Yeah, no problem.
later. We're connecting on a range of common interests today. I've called this episode From Dive Bars to AI Guides because in both respects, our lives have taken us in the venue space from working in more unorthodox places in our early beginnings to trying to influence the future of live entertainment on a grander scale. Reggie, welcome.
Thank you, Joel.
It's great to have you here, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. What I think is really interesting about you and having you on the show, the reason that I wanted to have you on is that you bring a perspective across different regions. So you spent quite a lot of time in Asia and back in Australia as well. And although we're an Asia Pacific organisation, most of the people listening to this podcast will be in Australia and New Zealand and won't necessarily have had exposure to the culture of the way the venue scene works in Asia. So I think that's a really interesting thing for us to be able to talk about today. And equally then, you know, how technology's playing a role in both of those regions as well, which is super interesting. But starting out, most people don't know about me that I got my start in this industry in inverted commas because at the time I didn't think of it as such. With friends of mine and I starting a warehouse party scene under a sex shop in Red Hill, pseudo-legal, I think you'd call it. Like we ran the place for 5 years and we didn't ever have the police kind of disrupt us too much. But it was definitely a run and gun operation that was about, trying to build a scene and getting people interested in coming to the venue. But you had a kind of somewhat similar experience in Shanghai. Do you want to talk about your beginnings in this industry?
Yeah, I think there's probably deeper similarities than I initially thought under a sex shop. My party was called STD.
Yeah, I was going to say that means something else, obviously.
Yeah, so I when I arrived in China, I went there as a music producer and I was working 18 hours a day, almost 7 days a week for at least 6 months, 6 to 8 months. And then one day, one of my friends was like, "Hey, Reggie, you need to get out of the studio. Do you want to go outside and check it out?" So I went out. I realized there's actually nowhere to go out to in Shanghai. And this is back in 2006. So I started going out a little bit, meeting a few people. I went to this one event, met a lot of really cool cats. And one of the people I met there, he was interested in setting up a sort of nightly party or weekly party. And that's something that I was interested in doing as well, to kind of contribute to that scene. So his name was Albert. Me and Albert got together. We made another friend, a girl called Nikki, who was Chinese. Albert was an expat, I guess you could say like a Canadian-born Chinese that was from Toronto. And the three of us got together and we're like, hey, let's do something every 2 weeks because there's no regular music scene here. And we're like, yeah, what should we call it? And we're like, well, it needs to be catchy. And I think we had a few drinks by this point, and someone, I think it might have been me, came up with this genius idea to call it STD. And so that's what it was, and it, like an STD, it stuck.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that no one would publish this event because it was, all the expat magazines and lifestyle, guides and stuff. It's like, it's just too naughty. We don't want to touch it. Too edgy, yeah. Yeah, so we kind of became underground. Like you had to look for it a little bit at the beginning to understand what an STD party was. We ran it every 2 weeks, and the format was we had a band. We had DJs at the beginning to sort of open up the night. Then there would be a band that would play, and then DJs after. And at this point, there was nothing like it in Shanghai. There was just no kind of sort of alternative subculture that was putting on regular, nightly, regular events. And so we came in and did it. And it was an amazing experience, starting from very, very humble beginnings to, after 10 years, it's actually still going.
Really?
Yeah. So I left in 2016, but it's turned more into sort of like a media platform, and it's in China, sharing all this news about music culture from around the world, particularly sort of underground subculture stuff. So it's outlived me, and I think part of it, I'm so glad I could contribute, obviously, to the STD and founding it, but also just to the greater Chinese and Shanghai music community.
And they're still operating events under that moniker?
Yeah, I think they don't do as many events as before, but it's turned into almost like I guess like the equivalent of a Facebook page, but like a WeChat sort of publication of just like newsletters, articles, thought pieces, like deep dives into music culture and stories and personalities. And less, I think, events. But to be completely honest, I haven't been following it as closely as I used to. But yeah, I'm really glad it's still going.
And from that experience, then you moved on to Arcade.
Yeah, so we basically started off just doing local bands and DJs, and we wanted to get bigger and bigger. Every single show, we were almost like outgrowing the last venue that we went into. And so we were trying to find bigger venues, more bands and artists, and eventually bands and artists from overseas, and started touring those bands through Shanghai, but also China. And for a long time, it was hard for us to find a home, because we kept moving around, and it was kind of part of our identity as well. But me and my partners were looking for venues for years. And so in 2012, we opened Arcade, which is actually with separate partners, but it was a cocktail lounge, probably like 100 cap venue, where you could listen to DJs. We had stand-up video game machines, so people playing Street Fighter, and like organic sort of like cocktails and drinks. And that became our new lounge for all the cool kids in the city, like everyone from musicians to artists to people that worked at brands. It became sort of a melting pot where people kind of got together and just hung out. And then the year after that, we finally found our home for the bigger events, which was Arkham. And that was a 1,200 cap underground club next to the barracks of the Chinese army in the middle of the city. And it used to be an old ammunitions factory warehouse. And we turned that into, the coolest club that was in China at the time.
Was there a lot of unique compliance issues to deal with a venue like that in China next to a military facility?
Yes and no, in that China operates a little bit differently to Australia in terms of regulations. There's ways to finesse, I guess, regulations, but I think over time it got stricter and stricter. So when we first moved in and we were doing, early STD parties or parties in Arkham and Arcade, it was pretty lax, and we had a good relationship with the local authorities. And but over time, they did increase those regulations, particularly things like, fire escapes and fire exits and stuff. And we were operating in literally this old bunker.
Yeah.
So over time, those regulations surfaced and became more of a problem. But in the early days, it was the wild, wild east, basically.
What were the other big challenges in operating that venue?
I think Arkham at the beginning, like opening any venue, it was just getting people to notice it, especially when we're doing something so different to anything that's come before us, literally doing underground shows, trying to create an identity and a culture that hadn't existed before, and to bring those people together and then make it last, right? Make it so everyone feels that they're contributing towards it too. So I remember in the first 3 months, the club was too big. We couldn't fill it, right? It was 1,200 cap on the weekends. When we were starting, we'd get like 300 people if we're lucky here and there. And so that was a huge problem early on. We couldn't fill it. We didn't have the resources to really push it out because we were all everything was independent. So I had this idea of bringing in a curtain, like this huge curtain that would close half the room. And that saved us because now we could create a bit of a vibe instead of this empty room. Even when we've sold as many tickets as we could, it still felt so empty. We were able to sort of manage the space better. I think that was just something that we had to learn. And then through that, we were able to cater to smaller events and then eventually open that curtain up. And as Arkham grew, as more people visited it, they all wanted to come back. It felt very special at the time. And so, we didn't need that curtain as much in the later years.
That creation of iconic cultural moments in a city that starts from the blood, sweat and tears of passionate, motivated individual people. I feel like there's so much that major venues can learn from that, because it's not, how they're set up to operate, but thinking about the need for increased utilisation of venue spaces everywhere. Venues are going to have to get better at the community building part of it, and it's what the young people that we were did really well, which was take a risk on an idea, guerrilla market it, get people really interested in it. And again, that's such a foreign way of operating in sort of, not in the pejorative sense, but bureaucratized venues that have, a lot of rules around the way content is developed.
Definitely. I think you've kind of nailed it. Venues are what goes inside of them, right? It's the culture, it's the people, it's the energy that you create in these special moments, these special events. And then you want people to take a bit of that energy away and then other people to bring, their energy. And then so all of a sudden it becomes this sort of like third space, it becomes this institution. And I think obviously that takes time to build, but if you can build it, it becomes iconic. People will talk about it for years. And even with Arkham, I left Arkham in 2016. It moved to another location after I left, and it was still doing really well. COVID, I think, got to it, and it closed down during COVID. But people still talk about it. When I see my friends from Asia and stuff, they'll introduce me as like the guy that did Arkham and they did the Shanghai underground music scene, because they kind of grew with it. They took something out of it as well. And so I think, with these larger venues, I think that culture, that idea of like being able to contribute to it. And now with technology, especially from a commercial point of view, there's so many ways to be able to slice it up and, have it so different types of communities can enjoy it through different ways, through different mediums. Like a great example of this is Dodgers Stadium last year. I think it was last year or the year before. They worked with like VTubers, Japanese virtual characters that live stream. And they sold out the Dodgers Stadium. They did a collaboration with the Dodgers. There were lines just through the door and along, around the corner. I hadn't seen lines like that before, because this is a new experience and this is this new culture that was kind of merging with this traditional kind of baseball culture. And it was a huge success. Merchandise sales from that collaboration alone was through the roof. So it's happening. I think it's starting to, I'm starting to see, some of these venues and event organizers and things starting to experiment, start to merge different technologies or different sort of fan cultures. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is a great example of, yes, it's a football stadium, but all the major events that they do there. So, at the end of the day, venue is what you put into it, and there's so much you can put into it these days.
Yeah, and it's the the conundrum in Australia. It's different in other countries where private ownership is much more in control of venues, but when you do have government so dominant in the venue space in Australia, then that makes it slightly more difficult to have that level of innovation.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the limitations, I guess, in Australia that I've noticed compared to Asia. When I was in China between 2006, I left in 2019, it was sort of this golden generation of like the tech boom, social media boom. Younger generations all had mobile phones, access to international culture. I was a bridge in a sense when I operated there, but I got to see all of that mature. And now we look at China and it's this tech futuristic kind of country. When I arrived there, it felt like I was walking back into the 80s. So I saw and witnessed this incredible pace of technological advancement and how people were adopting that technology. Now, I've been back in Australia since, 2020 or so. And I've noticed since I've been back here, like we are much more resistant to change. I think part of that is regulation, or having need to be led by the government for certain for certain advancements, technologies, AI, things like that. Where China is a culture of, I want to get on the next big thing, the next trend, the next technology, and then I want to show my friends how I'm using it. And so it's kind of like apples and oranges a little bit in terms of the culture behind adoption and change.
And that's quite paradoxical, because China's external image, or the way it's perceived by Australia and the West, is that it's totalitarian. So therefore people may adopt things that they're told to adopt. Whereas in a way, I mean, I really believe we have, in the collective unconscious of Australia, there's still a convict there who's, waiting to be told what to do by the law. Like, we are that nanny state thing here is real. And I think that it does bleed into what the culture of innovation and then the public adoption of innovations are like in Australia. And also because we're an island nation, like it's not easy for us to go to the next country and see amazing things that are happening. It's a long way to travel. Yeah. To travel anywhere.
Yeah. I think though, like, I think there's, it just takes a concerted effort. I think it needs to take a little bit of leadership on different, parts of the spectrum, but government is a good start. I know that there's been some updates on AI governance and things like that. But if we look at like Singapore, for example, which is obviously a very tech forward country, they leaned into AI very early. They've had policies and they've had infrastructure and conversations around how, everything from institutional businesses to SMEs can all adopt AI, and how, what the path forward might look like. And we're just starting those conversations, it feels like. And so obviously from a government point of view, things need to move there for sure. But then also it doesn't stop anybody else experimenting with it, at least becoming familiar with it and testing it as these regulations start to firm up a little bit more.
So you've been working for a long time post Arcade and Arkham in this emerging technology space in Asia and in Australia with regards to the entertainment industry. Step one sounds like it was 88 Rising and Club Media. Do you want to talk about what they were?
Yeah, so 2016, when I decided to leave sort of the live entertainment space, I wanted to go more into media and production. So I got hired by a company called 88 Rising. At the time, they were a sort of a record label, artist management, and sort of music festival as well. It's like an entertainment brand that was just rocketing. It was representing Asian young artists, like young subcultures, predominantly that were from, I think at the beginning, just out of the US. But then they started managing a lot of artists through Asia and then take them onto the global stage. So I was hired basically to take them to market in Asia. I set up the office in Shanghai, hired the team, and my main job there was creative director and a little bit of GM sort of work across everything else, but mainly sort of finding bread from brands, because China had a lot of brand money, and so we were pitching pretty big branded projects, TV commercials. We got brands to support our music videos and sponsor that, and I was overseeing all those projects as a creative director. That sort of gave me my first taste of media and how the sort of ad industry was working, brand sponsorships, all those sort of elements. And when I left 88 after about 4 years, I started my own company called Club Media, which was sort of carrying on the work that we were doing at 88. We had a lot of relationships with like idols and stuff across Asia. But then I was very interested on where entertainment was heading. So I was looking at things like everything from Web3 and blockchain to experiential media. Me and my co-founder created a micro label called Avastar, which was focused on virtual humans making music, like virtual idols. And this was, pre-metaverse and stuff. And it was, we found some success with that. Like we did some collaborations with Adidas, with Puma, making and releasing music videos. And so I was, this started giving me a bit more of a taste on this itch that I had around technology and innovation and how that can intersect with the entertainment space.
So you're now currently, and I should have said at the beginning of the podcast, working on Alias.
Yep.
Reggie's company showcased at the VMA Congress this year. So for those of you who aren't there, haven't been there before, at Congress the last 2 years, Momentous Technologies has sponsored 4 startups to come and showcase to the venue industry, and that's part of the VMA's drive to ramp up technology adoption in the venue industry and also speed up that innovation by closing the gap between when a startup creates its product and going to market and getting more close contact with customers early on. Alias is, in its current form, is a conversational AI tool, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But Alias has origins before that, doesn't it, in terms of it being something slightly connected to what you were talking about then?
Yeah, so when we were creating the virtual humans, weird to say that out loud, but when we were creating these sort of like virtual characters that embodied, personality that was fictional, there was a lot of insight into the use of avatars, especially using avatars in the space of entertainment or on the internet when you don't want to show yourself, basically, like because of various things. It could be because of discrimination or just keeping your identity concealed. And we wanted to democratize that technology and give access to anyone that wants to have a 3D character to perform with or to make content with. And so that's kind of where Alias started. We started looking at like sort of 3D technologies in real-time technologies of using these sort of 3D mascots and avatars to create content. We created an AI live streamer, streamed for 6 months straight on Twitch whilst playing Minecraft, and people could chat to it on like multiple platforms. So we did like a lot of these sort of experiments. It's when we connected it, the virtual sort of character technology and the motion capture technology mixed with AI, and we submitted our product to a Google accelerator, and we got accepted at the end of 2025. And then Google told us, like, hey guys, like, this is really awesome. You can be doing a lot more than what you think you have. And so through that accelerator, they helped us sharpen what our value proposition is and currently is, which is taking it more away from sort of like content creation, but focusing a bit more on like a B2B solution where we can communicate large kind of knowledge bases of content through conversation in any language. And so having worked in the event industry for such a long time, one of the big barriers that I've seen, particularly across the Asia Pacific, is we have a huge concentration of different languages spoken. So when you go to a conference, especially if you're not from that region, sometimes you can get a little bit lost. If you're going to a festival, right? Event tourism is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. So Asia Pacific is actually leading in conversational AI, event tourism, as well as having this huge multicultural sort of melting pot. So I wanted to apply the technology to sort of try and bring people together and make it more accessible. So when you do go to an event, you go to a venue, this AI will basically be your personal concierge. It'll take you through the event. It can help you personalize a schedule at a conference, all in your native language, with videos and images and audio, so it's content rich, and it's all trained on official documents from the business.
So it's somewhat implicit in what you've just said, but to call it out further, like what's the key advantages for a venue or event in using the technology?
Yeah, so
rather than just being a nice to have, like how is it going to genuinely transform things for them?
Yeah, so if you look at how people are using AI today, it's almost a general consensus that everyone will ask an AI now when they have a question. Like even Google has its AI
built into it,
right? So the user behavior now is that you ask a question and you get an answer. That's kind of the expectation that we're all getting familiar with. Now, if you ask ChatGPT or if you ask Claude or whichever LLM about a venue, let's say it's a big venue that you're asking a third party about information on your organization or business. And that is an interaction which I believe business should own, right? Instead of relinquishing that to a third party like Anthropic or OpenAI and potentially getting hallucinations on responses and stuff, why not own that interaction? Why not own that and give official, credible information into almost like your own mini LLM or your own conversational AI that users or visitors can ask and get an answer directly. And the questions they can ask can, be as simple as an FAQ, or it can connect to like multiple different systems. So it can ask about ticketing or scheduling. It can ask about a number of different things depending on how you connect it. So Alias becomes, on the front end, it becomes an interface for any user of any nationality or language spoken to interact with it to get information. And on the back end, it can almost work as like a hub and spoke. So you can connect to different systems to feed the information you want Alias to present to the visitor.
What I really liked in demoing it at Congress was that you can search the whole program within it by asking a question, but you can also ask questions about non-programmatic or venue relevant things in the precinct. So in the same conversation, I'm saying, well, what's on at 12 o'clock in room B? And then after that, where can I go for lunch? And that bleeding together of the event with the rest of the real world is not something that can be otherwise achieved. Like for me, that was incredibly useful.
Absolutely. I think that's where when we have an interface, which, we've put a lot of effort into making the UI UX feel smooth and easy to use, then it's really about, okay, what experience do we want to give this visitor, right? So in the case that you mentioned, it's having sort of additional recommendations to nearby places to eat. Or if you're at a conference, like where should I go have a meeting? What's a quiet place or a good place to have a coffee? And because we can connect it to all these different things, this is kind of what makes it agentic. We can pad all these different features and use cases. So another one, is public transport. We can connect it to Google, not just Google Places like you mentioned, but also like Google Maps and transport. So if you need to get home from an event, you can ask, the concierge, you can ask Alias about how to get home. Where is the nearest place to get an Uber, or how long, are the trains going for? All these questions can be baked into the platform and, and more, obviously.
Which makes the event app that it might be integrated into much, much, much more useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you asked before, what's the big advantage? I think one thing that I didn't touch upon, but probably the most obvious one, is the better use of human resources. So I've been talking to a lot of different venues. One thing that I've seen come up a lot is even just like manning an inbox on an email, right? Like sitting, so many teams have one person sitting at the email, talking about the bag policy over and over again, or if they can bring an umbrella or a pram. And that's not the best use of human capital, right? That's an FAQ job, but no one goes to FAQs anymore because I said to you before, they just want to ask a question and get an answer. So instead of them sitting at the email for customer experience, they should be focusing on, higher touch human interactions, maybe supporting those that need to have wheelchair access, or maybe like a VIP group that needs to come through, as opposed to just these sort of like repetitive tasks or repetitive questions that they need to keep answering. But then beyond that, I guess you can start looking at all these different integrations that can connect with Alias. For example, in the future, I could see us having ticketing. We've just added Shopify, so you can now buy merch from Alias as an interface. Literally, the sky's the limit, right? Because we've built the foundation.
So you're building this on an iterative basis, and you're doing research and testing it with people. What's the future of agentic AI in this industry. What do you think is the blue sky implementation of it?
Yeah, so that's still something I think is open to debate, and I think it will depend on how much people want to rely on it and use it. On its fundamental level, as I mentioned before, it's just about moving repetitive tasks out of the way and having it dealt by an AI. I think it's really important to keep a human in the loop because, like any kind of technology or even humans at this point, it's prone to make errors. So it's having someone that understands the systems, that understands all these ways to automate these repetitive tasks and problems, automating it, keeping an eye on it. I think that's the fundamental, initial first step. And I think beyond that, it's about what kind of venue you have, like who your visitors and your audience are, what they want, what they want out of an interaction. If they do want a personal concierge, maybe you have a lot of international visitors or guests, what can you offer them to make their experience better without, putting more weight on the existing stuff that you have?
And that multilingual component of it is the key one there, right? Like you can't employ 130 translators.
I mean, you could,
yeah,
but it wouldn't be. It just wouldn't. It's obviously not feasible.
What's
right?
the language translation engine? How does that?
We're using Google.
Okay.
Yeah. So because we went through the accelerator, we've plugged in quite a number of Google products with the Google product team. So we've got Google Places, Google Maps. The LLM itself, like Google Gemini, is what we're using, and that comes, with its own multilingual capabilities, and we've sort of just added to it.
Yeah, great.
So I mean, exactly right. That's something that people probably don't think about too much. You make a website, and you've got English as your, here in Australia or ANZ, we've got English as our base language. But we have a lot of tourists that come through. We have a lot of a very linguistically diverse audience society across the region. And so now you can sort of cater more to them. It just feels a bit more inclusive, and really you're not changing too much. And I guess the other thing with Alias is you can have it as like a standalone website like we had at the VMA, where you can just save it to your home screen and use it like an app. Alternatively, you can just sit on a website like a chatbot widget as well. So you can kind of have both without, again, you don't have to rock the ship too much.
We're out of time for today. How can people learn more about this? Because we've just scratched the surface of it. How do people learn more about Alias?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, which is alias.cm. It's like a .com, but we couldn't afford the O, so it's a .cm.
Yeah.
They can reach out to me. I'd love to speak to anyone out there that's working in venues or operations or something adjacent. I'm really excited for what AI can solve today, and I think that one thing I'm learning about is a lot of the venues, a lot of the teams are still lacking the sort of internal planning and strategies and capabilities, and that's something that I'm spending a little bit more time on as well, is to sort of reinforce the thinking about how do we look at a technology like AI. Do we need it? If we do need it, what is it that we need? It might not even be Alias. And putting together a bit of a action plan on how to implement it and sort of train it through the organization and things.
Great. Well, I'm thrilled that you've given us half an hour of your time today, and it's a project that I'm really passionate about. I thought it was fantastic to see it demonstrated at Congress, and I'd encourage everyone listening to go to alias.cm to check it out. Until then, though, we'll see you next time in the next stage. Bye-bye.